Hello beautiful people, welcome to my channel. This is, what if Issei was born into a high-ranking devil family like Rias Part 3. Please support the author Drake12, for this awesome fan fiction. In the 2 days since the fight between Issei and Rias, a lot of things had changed in the life of Issei Hyoudou Heir. Due to the 10-day training camp that the orc took, the group fell behind on a lot of schoolwork. Rias somehow convinced the school that they went on a trip to Hokkaido to investigate the supernatural for the yearly paper that each club has to hand in. As a result of this trip, the past 2 days for the young devils had been hell. All they did was focus on schoolwork rather than their usual devil work. In the past 2 days, Vali had also transferred into Issei's class, causing many of the male and even some female students to freak out at her beauty. As a result, Vali got the title of the third great lady of Kuo Academy, being compared to Rias and Akeno. Issei, Kiba, Asia and Vali, due to missing most of the second year, had to finish and submit a maths assignment about water and energy usage in their current household, which was hard for 3 of them as they all lived together. This assignment caused the 4 to begin to get really close with one another. Rias and Akeno had to complete a modern history assignment of the life of Albert Speer and his role in the Nazi state. Although this was not Rias or Akeno's preferred topic in modern history, the 2 girls did their best to try to impress the love of their lives. This topic caused many debates between Rias and Akeno about Issei. As a result of his bravery and strength he showed against Rias in order to protect her, Rias had become very protective of Issei around the other girls, mainly because she didn't want to see him hurt again like he was with the light sword, and secretly she wanted to protect herself if Issei did leave her. Kaneko, on the other hand, hadn't had anything to do as her exams and assignments had been completed before they had left on the training exercise. As a result, Kaneko had been left alone for the past few days. In this time she watched the others worry and struggle over their current problems. However, due to the young devils working together on some of their projects together, they finished them off and handed them in, quickly earning top marks. As Issei flopped down on his bed, proud with the work he had just completed in his completely exhausting day of school, Issei thought he would get some sleep before the big ceremony. Drifting off to sleep, Issei's mind was filled with pleasant dreams. Dreams of his future with Rias. In his dream, Issei could see Rias slightly older than she was now. She wore a silk white sundress with small roses printed onto the fabric. Her crimson hair was protected by a massive straw sun hat and her feet were housed by brown sandals. Issei, Rias spoke. As Issei wandered over to his lovely bride who sitting on a grass hill, Issei soon noticed a small lump in his abdomen. Sitting behind his wife, Dream remember. Cradling her in his arms and rubbing her belly with his hands, Rias finally spoke up. Issei, what do you want our baby to be, boy or girl? Rias asked, looking towards her husband. I don't care, Rias, as long as it's our child and is healthy, that is all that matters, Issei said, looking towards his wife. As Issei drifted deeper and deeper into his dream, the sudden noise of his alarm going off woke the young devil up. Looking towards this alarm clock, Issei noticed it said 5:30 p.m. Getting up and walking towards the shower, Issei was pleasantly surprised when he bumped into Rias on the way. Rias, how long have you been home for? Issei asked her as he looked towards his crimson princess. About half an hour. There was a meeting for all the club presidents to attend to after school, and that's why I couldn't walk home with you. But when I got home I noticed that you were sleeping peacefully, so I decided to do some housework, Rias said as the 2 proceeded to the bathroom. After Rias and Issei showered together, much to both their enjoyment, they then proceeded back to their individual bedrooms where they prepared to get ready. Due to this event being very formal, most of the current heads of the 72 pillars and their heirs were present at the event. Due to it being such a grand event, both Rias and Issei wore their respective clan colors and ceremonial robes. Rias' gown for the night was a red frock dress that covered most of her skin. She wore black shoes underneath and carried a black purse. Rias also had a small tiara placed on her head and was represented her place as heiress to the Gremmeries. Issei wore a black ceremonial robe that consisted of yellow shoulder guards and a white neck scarf that was in the design of the Boer family. His robes also included purple cape that fell over his left shoulder that was tied together with a green emerald. His black dress shoes complemented the entire outfit. Issei chose to include a white lines detailed onto his cape to pay respect and homage to his mother and her clan. Think of what Searsex wore to the 3 factions peace meeting. Looking at himself in the mirror, Issei couldn't help but feel nervous. Due to his clan's problem, Issei and his father were very rarely invited to large gatherings like this, and when they were only seen as guests, rather a pillar family. As Issei left his room and made his way to the living room where Lord Gremmery and his father would pick Rias and himself up. Arriving in living room was blown away by how grown up and attractive Rias was. Gone were the days where Rias and Issei played together as children, getting dirty and having fun without a care in the world. As Rias noticed Issei's arrive, she couldn't help but blush. Walking towards each other, the two shared a hug as well as a small kiss. When the two parted, all that remained of their exchange was a small bridge of saliva. Standing looking at each other, Rias proceeded to straighten Issei's shirt and cape. "You look beautiful, Rias," Issei said as he looked towards the young heiress, causing her to blush. "You don't look too bad yourself," she replied, trying to hide her blush as she rested her head on his shoulder. Proceeding to sit on the lounge that was in the center of the room, it wasn't long until a gramarye symbol appeared in the room. Standing up, both Rias and Issei began to prepare for the guest that was going to appear any second. When the light died down, two figures appeared to greet the two heirs. "Greetings, you two look fantastic tonight," Lord Hyoudou said as he fully appeared. "You're completely right, Guru," Lord Gramarye replied, looking at the Hyoudou head. "Hello, father," the two replied in response to their father's comments. As Lord Hyoudou began to walk closer to his son, Issei noticed that he was wearing very similar clothing to him. However, he did not possess the white lines that were on Issei's cape, and his cape was over both shoulders instead of just one. Looking over towards Lord Gramarye, Issei noticed that he was wearing something very similar to what his own father was wearing, but in crimson, and his cape possessed a brown jewel. After discussing the event for this evening, the four devils entered a magic circle that transported them to a hall in the underworld capital of Lufiad. Walking into the ceremonial hall, Issei and his father were met with mixed reactions from the other devils' families. The Gramaryes and Citri clans and the Bael heir were the only people that seemed to be pleased with the outcome of the raiding game. The other families were either unsure on how they should react or completely disgusted that they won the raiding game. As the Gramaryes and the other pillar families took their seats, Issei and his father stood there waiting for the ceremony to start. The room soon filled with the mixture of red, green, blue and purple that reflected of the walls. When the four colors died down, they were replaced with the four devil kings. Looking up, Issei noticed that Sirzek Lucifer, Ajuka Beelzebub, Seraphal Leviathan and Falbium Asmodeus were standing there ready for the ceremony to begin. Bowing, all the devils in the hall got down and knelt before their leaders. "Rise," Sirzek said as he and his fellow Satans sat on their thrones. As the proceedings for the 72 pillar meeting discussion started, normally discussion about how they are going to solve the current problems in the underworld and other events such as stray devil control continued. The dissuasion continued for about 45 minutes until Sirzek stood up. "As many of you may know, this is not a normal meeting between household clans and their heads. Tonight I am pleased to be able to welcome back one of the semi-extinct clans back into the 72 pillar families," Sirzek said, looking towards the other devils in the room. "Lord Lucifer, you can't be serious letting an extinct clan back into the 72 pillars after they defied orders during the Great War," Lord Phoenix said, getting out of his seat. "Lord Phoenix, do you understand why they were evicted from the 72 pillars?" Ajuka stated, looking disappointed in the Phoenix head. "No, why does it matter? The only thing that matters is that they rigged the fight that was between Phoenix and Boer to weaken us true devils," Lord Phoenix said, getting angry while looking at Issei. "The reason why they were evicted was because they saved another pillar family," Sirzek said, starting to get annoyed at this little show. "Well, it must have been a weak family if they need help from trash," Lord Phoenix said, trying to be smart. "Considering that the family they saved was your own family, and that it was Riser that cheated in the raiding game, not Issei, shows a great level of disrespect towards the clan that saved your own, wouldn't you agree?" Sirzek said, looking towards Lord Phoenix as he sat down in defeat. "Lord Hyoudou and Heir Hyoudou, would you please stand?" Seraphal said as she walked towards the front of the stage. As Issei and his father stood, they noticed the looks they were getting were to the same ones they received when they walked in. Continuing to walk toward the Devil Kings, they both suddenly felt the sense of belonging among the 72 pillar families. Stopping in front of the Devil Kings, Issei and his father waited for more instructions. "Lord Hyoudou, kneel," Sirzek said as Guru kneed before his king. "Do you accept this mantle as one of the pillar families of hell? Do you agree to put your interests aside for the greater good of hell, and do you always promise to keep the peace between the different levels of Devil Society?" Sirzek said as he looked towards the Hyoudou head. "I do," Guru said without hesitation. "Heir of the Hyoudou clan, do you undertake all these responsibilities that your father has agreed to after he steps down as the head of his clan? Do you agree to represent Devil Society as a young member of the 72 pillars and treat any marriage and raiding game with respect?" Sirzek said, looking at his future brother-in-law. "I do," Issei said as he looked towards Sirzek. "So without further ado, I, Lucifer, King of the Devils, allow the Boer clan to be welcomed back into the 72 pillars as the 10th pillar family and hold the rank of Archduke." When Searzek finished his declaration, the hall erupted in clapping. When the clapping died down, Lord Boer began to walk off. They continued to walk until he noticed Issei was still kneeling. "Is there something wrong, heir of the Boer clan?" Serafal said as she looked towards Issei. "Yes, my kings, by any chance would I be able to say a few words?" Issei said as he stood up, causing his father and Lord Gremory to smile. "Father, why are you smiling?" Rias asked, looking towards her father. "You may," Searzek said, taking a seat along with his fellow Satans. "I would like to say thanks to a special clan that is present in this hall tonight. This family helped not only my father and mother to grow up and meet each other, but also helped me get through the grief of losing my mother at a young age. The family that I'm talking about is the Gremory clan," Issei said, surprising a few devil clans. "After I lost my mother, I was a shell of my former self. This was until I met the Gremorys. They restored meaning to my life and I owe it to them. The truth is I owe you my life to one member in particular, Rias Gremory," Issei said, looking towards Rias. "Rias, I have known you ever since I lost my mother. You helped me get through the hardest part of my life. You replaced my heartbreak and grief with love and joy, something my mother would have wanted me to do with my life," Issei said as he walked over to the blushing Rias. "Ever since I met you, you gave me something that I never knew I was missing. As you know, Rias, you and I are already engaged due to a marriage proposal between our clans. However, I have known for many years and I know that you like the tradition romance stories where a man and a woman fall in love," Issei said, causing Rias and some of the devils in the room to wonder what was going on. "So what I'm trying to say is, Rias Gremory, will you marry me and make it official to the devil world?" Issei said as he got down on one knee and presented a ring to Rias. The ring that Issei presented was a gold ring encrusted with diamonds, portraying waves around the entire ring. The ring was also safely encased in a red box. As Rias looked at Issei in pure shock, she couldn't help but shake her head up and down. "Yes, Issei, I will marry you," she said, started weeping as Issei placed the ring on her left ring finger. Erupting in clapping and sounds of joy, the group of devils were surprised but happy for the future couple. With the end of the ceremony, the devil kings left through magical circles, followed by all the other devil families until 2 remained. "Congratulations, son," Lord Boer said as he looked at Issei. "Thanks, Dad. I think Mum would be very proud of the way you and I have moved on with our lives," Issei said as he hugged his father. "I told you she'd accept," Lord Gremory said, looking at Rias and Issei, who were now arm in arm. "You knew, father," Rias said in a shocked tone. "Yes, dear. Issei here came to me last night and spoke to your mother and I and asked for our permission, and when we told him you're already engaged, he gave us that speech that he gave all the pillar families," Lord Gremory said, smiling. "And this ring, Issei, it must have cost you a gold mine. Where did you get it?" Rias asked, looking at the ring on her finger. "Well, Dad gave it to me," Issei said, looking at his father. "What do you mean Dad gave it to you?" Rias said, confused. "Well, Rias darling, that ring on your finger is the very ring I gave to Issei's mother when I proposed to her," Goru said as he looked at the shocked Rias. "So it's a family heirloom," she said. "Yeah, and I can still remember hearing my wife saying that when Issei falls in love with a girl, she wants this to be their engagement ring as well," Goru said, looking at Rias. "Well then, Lord Boer, I will love this ring to the day I die," Rias said, looking at her future father-in-law. "I hope you will," he replied. As the heads of the Gremory and Boer clans vanishing into a magic circle, Rias turned around and gave Issei the biggest kiss the two have ever shared. Breaking apart, the blushes on both their faces were easily to see. "What was that for?" Issei asked curiously. "That's for being an heir to a clan of the 72 pillars, the man that I fell in love, and for someone who loves me, and not just for my body but also for all my little quirks," Rias said, looking at Issei. "Let's go home, shall we?" Rias said, smiling at Issei. Teleporting back to Issei's human house, Rias and Issei were still hand in hand. Beginning to walk towards the front door, Issei could help but feel happy about how his evening turned out. The amount of love that Issei had for Rias and the joy that he felt when he was able to give her the proposal she always wanted. On top of that, his father and their clan were seen as actual devils from a famous family, and that now nobody would try and take Rias without a fight. As Issei reached for the door handle, he suddenly felt something was wrong. "Rias, get behind me," Issei said as he pulled Rias behind his back as he created a magic circle. "What's wrong, Issei?" she said, looking at him with a worried face. Turning the doorknob of the front door, Issei activated his sacred gear just to be safe. "I'm here when you need me, partner," Issei heard Diedrich say. "Thanks, Diedrich," Issei said as he opened the door. "Congratulations." As Issei and Rias entered the front door, they noticed that all their friends were there ready to congratulate Issei for his recognition as an heir to a high-class family. "What is this?" Rias asked in confusion. "Well, Rias, seeming we couldn't come to the actual meeting, we thought we would have a party here instead," Akeno said as she walked up and gave Issei a hug. "Akeno, what do you think you're doing to Issei?" Rias said as Akeno kissed him on the cheek. "Congratulating the future king of both the Boer and Gremory clans," Akeno said as she proceeded to walk over to Rias. "Congrats, Issei." "My king," Vali said, bowing and kissing him on the other cheek. "Vali," Rias said, looking at the silver-haired queen. As the others congratulated Issei in their own ways, Kiba with a handshake, Kaneko with a high five and Asia with a hug. The group began to celebrate by eating and drinking the food and soft drink that the peerages prepared. Continuing into the night, the teenagers talked until Akeno noticed something on Rias' finger. "Rias, what is that?" Akeno asked, looking at the Crimson King. "Yeah, what is it? It is really pretty," Vali continued. As Rias started to blush, she began to tell the other how Issei proposed to her in front of everybody at the meeting and how that both their fathers knew about it. Shocked at what they had just heard, most of the girls in the room were blown away by how romantic it sounded. Even Kaneko showed some emotion, much to Issei's joy. However, two girls in particular showed some form of jealousy. As Issei and Kiba walking into the kitchen beginning to clean up, and Kaneko and Asia went to have a bath, causing Rias, Akeno and Vale were left alone. "So girls, Issei has made his choice," Rias said, happily thinking that she had won his heart. "Yes, for a wife he has. However, Rias, are you forgetting that high-class devils can have harems? Even your father has one, remember?" Akeno said, causing Rias to worry. "And that Issei is a handsome young man, so expect competition," Vali said. "Don't get us wrong, Rias, both Vali and I are over the moon about his proposal, but remember what your mother said at training. You work the best when you have competition," Akeno said, casting Rias to calm down and hug the girls. "Okay girls, just let him make the choices and you both have to open up about whatever is holding you back though," Rias said as Issei walked in. "Is everything okay?" he said, looking at the girls. "It couldn't be better," they all replied. As it was beginning to get late, Kiba and Kaneko left after she got out of the bath. As Rias, Akeno and Vali went and had a bath, Issei went to the downstairs bathroom and had a shower there. When he got out of the shower, he noticed that the upstairs bathroom light had been turned off, as well as the girls' bedrooms' lights. Vali and Asia are in the same room. Proceeding to walk into his own room, he was surprised to see Rias laying on his bed. "Rias, is everything okay?" he asked, looking at her. "Everything is perfect," she replied, walking over to him. "I want you to make me your woman," Rias whispered into his ear, causing him to pick her up and throw her on the bed. Lemon started walking towards the bed. Issei began to look at Rias. Laying there on her back, the crimson hair that laid on her head cascaded down her back. Her inviting blue gave Issei a sense of trust and safety. Looking down to what Rias was wearing, Issei noticed that the clothes that she was wearing for the ceremony were gone and replaced with a white nightgown. "Are you ready, Rias?" Issei said as he looked at her. "Yes, but be gentle," she replied as she pulled his shirt off, allowing her to look at his well-developed abs. Pulling Issei on top of her, Rias began kissing Issei's neck, causing him to grab her butt. As the two continued kissing, Rias soon let go off Issei's neck as she proceeded to take off her nightgown, revealing her bare breasts. As Issei looked at them for a short while, Rias began to speak up. "Is everything okay?" she asked curiously. "Yes, you're just more beautiful than I could ever have imagined. Even though I've seen you naked so many times, you've never been this beautiful," Issei said, beginning to suck on Rias's nipples. "Aw, Issei, keep going," she said in between moans, wrapping her arms around his head. As Issei was playing with Rias' boobs, she began to reach towards his belt buckle. Releasing his hold on Rias, Issei allowed Rias to undo his belt and removing his pants, just leaving him in his underwear. Grabbing Issei's underwear, Rias pulled it down, revealing Issei's hardened member. "You're huge," Rias said, shocked, looking at Issei's cock that was easily 9 inches and a few inches wide. "Thank you, Rias, but it's really because of you," Issei said as Rias began giving him a hand job. "Are you ready to make me your woman?" Rias said as she began sucking his dick. While Rias was sucking Issei's dick, she couldn't help but feel happy with herself. Finally, Issei and her were alone and finally going to become one. Continuing for 5 minutes, Rias began to feel Issei tense up. "Rias, I'm gonna come," Issei said, trying to speak. "Come in my mouth, Issei," Rias said as she picked up the speed. "Rias," Issei said as he grabbed her head, causing her to not be able to pull back as he came in her mouth. When Rias pulled off Issei's cock, she began to swallow his cum, shocking Issei. You swallowed it? Issei said, shocked. Yeah, of course I did. You created it? Rias replied happily. As Rias began cleaning Issei's cock, she was surprised when she found it getting further and further away from her mouth. Before she knew, Issei had thrown her on her back and had proceeded to remove her panties. Covering her vagina with her hands, Rias was nervous to show Issei her womanhood. It's okay Rias, you can trust me, I'm never going to hurt you, Issei said as he removed her hands, revealing her perfectly shaved vagina. It's not that I don't trust you, it's just because I'm nervous seeing it's my first time, Rias said as she looked at Issei. Then I'll make it the best time you've ever had, and if you want me to stop or slow down, I will, Issei replied, looking at the blushing Rias. Removing her hands away from her vagina, Issei soon smashed his lips against Rias' lower lips and began to return the pleasure that Rias gave him only minutes before. Aw Issei. Rias moaned as Issei's handiwork caused her to get increasingly wet. Continuing, Issei made out with Rias' forbidden fruit for what seemed like forever. His movements sent pure ecstasy through her body. Issei surprised Rias by placing a finger inside of her vagina. Beginning to explore the insides of her forbidden fruit, it wasn't long until Rias began to move. Issei, I'm coming, Rias said as she arched her back while wrapped her legs around his head, coming on his face. Splashing Issei's face with her love juice, Rias collapsed onto her back. Issei, that was amazing, Rias said in between breaths. As Issei wiped off the liquid that was sprayed across his face, he soon slithers up from in between her legs until he was only a few inches away from her face. Are you ready, Rias? Issei said as he began to line his dick at Rias's entrance. Yeah, just be gentle, Rias said as she tried to hide her face only for Issei to kiss her. Of course I'll be gentle, I would never hurt you, Issei said as he kissed her again. Continuing to kiss Rias, Issei pushed his penis into her vagina, piercing her hymen, causing her to bleed a little. As Issei and Rias broke the kiss, Issei noticed that Rias was bleeding. Rias, are you okay? Did I hurt you? Issei said, beginning to panic. It's okay. The blood is a sign that I'm not a virgin anymore. Just wait till I give you a nod before you start moving, Rias said as she placed her hand on his cheek, causing Issei to sink into it. While waiting, Issei was pleased at the brief pause. Due to how tight Rias was, Issei was about to explode at any second. As Issei looked at Rias and waited for a few seconds, allowing Rias to adjust to the feeling of having Issei inside of her, nodding, Issei began to thrust inside the woman he loves. As Rias laid there, she began to notice that her pain was turning into pleasure. Pulling Issei into another kiss, Rias and Issei began to get more bold with their actions. Forcing her tongue into Issei's mouth, she began to expose all of his little nooks and crannies that his mouth had to offer. Breaking the kiss, Rias and Issei began to pick up the pace. Thrusting into her pussy faster and faster caused both Rias and Issei to feel pure ecstasy. Rias, I'm gonna come, where do you want it? Issei said as he began to thrust even faster. Inside, I want your children inside of me, Rias said as she began to pant as she wrapped her legs around his waist. But won't you get pregnant? Even if we're devils, I'm still part dragon, remember? Issei said as he continued thrusting. I don't care, all I want is for us to become a proper family, Rias said as she continued to tense as she felt her own organism coming. Rias, I'm coming, Issei said as he came inside of Rias, causing her to have her own orgasm, biting down on Issei's neck in the process. As Issei pulled out of Rias, a trail of cum was left that began to drip out of her vagina. Looking up at Issei, Rias quickly planted another kiss onto Issei's face before she got on top of him, straddling him in the cowgirl position. Someone's eager, Issei said as Rias began lining herself up again to be impaled by Issei. It's because I've been waiting so long to do this with you, Rias said as she slid down on Issei's cock. So have I, Issei said as he began to thrust into Rias, causing her to moan. Bouncing on top of him, Rias soon planted her hands onto Issei's hips, experiencing every inch of Issei's manhood. As Rias continued to bounce, Issei sat up and began to suck on her hardened breasts, causing her to moan. Continuing for another 10 minutes, Issei was once again at his limit. Babe, I'm going to burst, Issei said as he looked at Rias. I know, so am I, let's do it together, Rias said as she kissed Issei on the lips as they came together. As Issei came inside of Rias for the second time tonight, Rias soon laid next to Issei on his outreached right arm. Laying next to Rias, the two began to think back on the experience they just had. That was amazing, Issei, Rias said as she rolled over to lay on Issei's chest. You can say that again, Rias, that was the best experience of my life. I'm happy to have been able to spend my first experience with you, Issei said as he kissed Rias on the lips. Yeah, me too, Rias replied. Hey Diedrich, get the mark transfer ready please, Issei asked Diedrich.
With pleasure, partner. I'm happy that you have found someone that gives you something to fight for rather than just glory. You are my favorite partner I've ever had, Diedrich said, praising the young devil.
What's this mark? Rias asked curiously. Rias, as you know, I am the possessor of the boosted gear in Diedrich. Therefore I'm classified as a dragon in the physical sense, making me a devil-dragon hybrid. Issei said to the confused teenage girl. Yeah, so what, I still love you the same whatever you are, Rias replied, causing Issei to smile. There is a thing that male dragons do after the chosen a mate or mates to protect them from other male dragons or males in general, marking them as theirs. Issei said, causing Rias to blush. You can mark me if you want, Rias said as she moved her hair away from the left side of her neck. Thank you, Rias, you're getting a special mark as well, Issei said as it bit Rias' neck, causing a bit of blood to drip from her neck.
As Issei let some of his power enter Rias, causing her to moan in response and grab hold of his head, a bright green glow filled the room. When Issei released his jaws on Rias' neck, it was replaced with a red dragon symbol.
Lady Gramarye, that mark you have on your neck is very special, Diedrich said as Rias returned to laying on Issei's chest. What do you mean, Red Dragon Emperor? And please call me Rias, Rias said as she looked at the green circle that was in Issei's left hand. The mark that Issei just gave you is the mark of the headmate. This mark allows you to control Issei's harem if he has one, and also makes the first one to bear his child despite your devil problems, Diedrich said, shocking Rias. Aren't you forgetting something, Diedrich? Issei said, looking at the glow on his hand. Ah yes. The mark also gives you a high level of respect amongst other dragons and their mates, as you are the mate of my current host, and it also tells other males to back off if they don't want to mess with the strongest male dragon after Great Red, Diedrich said proudly. Thanks, Diedrich, Rias said. You're more than welcome, During said as he drifted off to sleep. With the conversation with Diedrich over, Rias and Issei fell quickly asleep, still in each other's embrace. Lemon end the next morning. Knock, knock, the sound of knocking entered the room. The sound of knocking at the door woke the tired Rias and Issei from their peaceful slumber. Yeah, who is it? Issei groaned as the door opened. Era, what do we have here? The voice said, causing Rias to wake up. Akeno, Rias said, quickly covering herself and Issei with the sheets of the bed. I wonder what happened here, Akeno said as she kept looking at Issei's body like it was a piece of, while blushing as she was seeing her crush in the nude. Nothing is happening here, Rias said in her defense. Well, that's not what I heard last night. All Issei fuck me harder, Akeno said as she reenacted Rias. Akeno, Rias said as she continued to go as red as her hair and sinking further into Issei as he began to giggle. Anyway, Rias, breakfast is ready, and remember the meeting the orc is having with the student council today, Akeno said as she left through the door as she continued to laugh. Let's get ready, Issei. Thanks for last night, we must do that again, Rias said as she gave him a kiss on the lips and went to have a shower. After eating a pretty normal breakfast, Issei and the group of young devils left the house to begin their journey to school. During the walk, Akeno couldn't help but tease Rias and Issei about what she saw this morning, continuing to push her breasts closer and further onto Issei's arm. So Issei, did you enjoy Rias last night? Akeno said as she licked Issei on the ear before she gave him a seductive smile, causing him to blush. Yeah, he said, unsure on how to respond as he turned as red as Rias' hair. Akeno, please stop teasing him. He's got a big day, remember, and plus last time I remember Issei belonged to me, Rias said, grabbing Issei's other arm as the group arrived at the front gates of the school where they meet Kaneko and Kiba. Good morning, the two said as they bowed politely. Morning to you too, Rias said as the group began to walk deeper into the school. Walking deeper into the school, Issei and his group once again became the center of everybody's attention. Issei, who was the new kid only weeks ago, was now considered Kuo's king by all the girls in the school. Rias, Akeno and Vali were considered the three great ladies, or what they were known as Kuo's Trimurti. Kiba was the prince, knight in shining armor, Kaneko the mascot, and Asia the innocent nun. They were all classified as Kuo's resident royals, which often caused Issei to chuckle due to how close they really were to being right. Continuing to walk, Issei continued to get more death stares than he had received on his first day of school as he continued throughout the school. Rias, what is this meeting we're attending today? Issei asked as he continued to walk throughout the school hand in hand with her. Today, my love, you are going to meet the student council, Rias said as she looked at Issei while playing with the ring on her finger. Really, what time do you want Vali and I to be there? Issei said as they stopped in the middle of the corridor. Straight after school, please. I have a feeling the meeting will go for a while, she said as she kissed him on the lips. Turning around, Rias began walking to her classroom with Akeno. Walking away from where they left Issei, Rias and Akeno turned and began to walk up the stairs to their classroom. Continuing down the corridor on the way to their classroom, Rias turned her attention to Akeno and began to speak up. "Akeno, are you jealous that I slept with Issei last night?" Rias said without malice as she looked towards Akeno, who began to look down. After a few more steps in total silence, she began to speak. "Yeah, I'm sorry Rias, I know you love him with all your heart, but I couldn't help but feel jealous. I couldn't help falling in love for him after he helped me get over my mother's death a few months after you saved me. To tell you the truth, he has been my rock since then," she replied as Rias grabbed her hand, holding it tightly. "I know Akeno, but you're going to have to tell him about your parentage and who you really are. You have to get over this fear of being rejected by him, because you know that he would protect and care for you to the same level that he would me and now Vali. It's just the type of man he is. It's the man we fell in love with," Rias said as they arrived at their classroom. Continuing their conversation as they sat down in the seats getting prepared for the day ahead, Rias heard Akeno finally open up about how she feels. "I know Rias, I'm just scared because of his views on fallen angels and after what they did to Issei's family by taking his mother away from him. I am just scared he will reject me as some sort of monster," Akeno said as she hid her face in shame. "It's okay Akeno, both Issei and I will help you get through this and help you accepting who you are," Rias said looking at her best friend. "Thank you, Rias," Akeno said wiping her eyes. At about the same time that Rias and Akeno were having their talk about Issei, Asia and Vali were arriving in their own classroom. Walking past the first couple of rows of tables, Issei's presences caused the normal conversations to run in the classroom. "Ah, it's Issei-kun, he is so cute," a brown-haired girl named Murayama whispered to her best friend as Issei walked past. "Yeah, I know, it's a pity that he's dating Rias-sama thought. I would totally date him," her pink-haired friend named Katase said, trying to be quiet, causing Issei to stop and look toward the girls. "It's nice to see you two ladies as well. You're both looking lovely today as always," Issei said, scaring the girls, causing them to blush and hide due to Issei hearing and what he said what they had to say about him. Sitting down and beginning class, Issei began to get curious about something. Waiting till after school to ask the question, Issei continued on with his day until the final bell went. Leaving the classroom, Issei, Vali and Asia began to walk towards the old school building. While walking, Vali had to go to the bathroom, so Asia and Issei waited outside. "Asia," Issei said as he looked towards the blonde bishop. "Yes," she said happily. "If you don't mind me asking, why were you excommunicated from the church?" "I won't tell anyone if you don't want me to," Issei asked, much to the shock of Asia. "Well, you see, I was raised by the church, due to my parents abandoning me as a baby. After a few years I discovered that I possessed a sacred gear and was moved to another church and made into a holy maiden. Because of this, people from all over Europe came to me to get healed from their diseases such as cancer, broken bones and other things. One day I found a man injured near the church and proceeded to heal him. Unfortunately, it turned out that the man was a devil. As a result, I was excommunicated from the church, and you know the rest." "Why do you ask?" Asia said, beginning to cry. "Because I care for you, Asia, so it's okay to be scared, but you are safe here," Issei said as he grabbed her shoulder as Vali walked out of the bathroom. Walking into the Orc Club room, Issei was happy to see that Rias and her peerage were all present. Sitting down on the couch, Issei happily smiled as Akeno handed him a tea. Sitting there, Issei couldn't help but think of how this meeting was going to go. Sipping on his tea, it wasn't long until there was a knock at the door. "Knock, knock, come in," Rias said as the door began to open. Walking into the room, 8 figures filled the empty void that was once near the door. As Issei looked at the 8 figures, he couldn't help but take his eye off one member of the group in particular. However, Issei's concentration was broken when Rias began to speak. "Ah, Sona, it's good to see you again," Rias said, looking at the female in the middle of the group. Sona was a relatively short young lady with a bob cut and wore glasses. She was relatively flat-chested, only having breasts slightly bigger than Kaniko's, and she wore the standards girl's uniform. "Yes, it is Rias," Sona said as she looked at the Gremory princess. "Lord Boer, congratulations on your place amongst the 72 pillars and your engagement," Sona said as she looked at Issei. "Thank you, but please call me Issei. Is it okay if I call you Sona?" Issei replied politely. "Yes, you may," she replied, looking at Issei, who smiled. As Issei proceeded to introduce Vali to Sona and her peerage, Sona was shocked that Issei was able to beat Riser in a fight against his entire peerage with just Vali. Turning around, Sona began to introduce her peerage. "The lady with rectangle glasses with long black hair is my queen, Tsubaki Shinra," Sona said as she pointed to her queen, who bowed politely. Tsubaki was a girl around the same height as Rias. Her hair reached mid-thigh. Issei noted that she had a fairly large size of breasts for a Japanese girl, as Issei devised her bust size was about similar size to an average Western girl. The next person that Sona introduced was her bishop Momo Hanakai. She was in the same year as Issei and had white hair that reached mid-back, and she'd had a reasonable size bust. Sona's other bishop Raya Kusaka had an appearance very similar to Momo, however she had brown hair instead of white. Continuing to introduce her peerage, Issei soon learned Sona's knight goes by the name of Tomo Meguri, who possessed a brown-red color hair. Tsubasa Yura, Sona's rook, had blue hair, and Issei could tell she rivaled Kaneko in terms of power as a rook. Issei was uninterested in most of Sona's peerage, not to have disrespect but because he knew he would be meeting them again. It wasn't until Issei was introduced to Sona's pawn Genshiro Saji. Saji was a boy slightly shorter than Issei. He had messy blonde hair and wore the Kuo boys' school uniform messily, however there was a strange purple aura that surrounded the boy. As Rias and Sona's peerages began to talk, Issei continued to look at the boy. Continuing to look at the boy, Issei was brought out of his trance when Sona spoke. Issei, thank you for sorting Riser out. He is the enemy to all women, plus he needed to be taught a lesson in respect, Sona said as she looked at the young heir. Hey, it was no problem, I just wish the fight would have lasted longer so I could have scared him a little more, but he chickened out too early, Issei said, beginning to chuckle. Hey Issei, do you smell that? Vali said, looking at Issei. Smell what? Sona said, looking at the two confused. Yeah, dragon, he replied, standing up and walking towards the window. Hey Sona, that pawn of yours, how many pieces did he cost? Issei said, surprising her. 4. Why? Sona said. Hey Saji, you don't mind if I call you that? Do you have a sacred gear? Issei said, shocking both Sona and the young boy. Looking at Sona, who gave him a nod, Saji began to speak. Yeah, it's this thing, but I have no idea what it is, and you can't call me by my first name, Saji said as he activated his sacred gear. When Saji's scare gear appeared, his left hand and had the appearance of a purple lizard with a deformed face. Looking at his sacred gear for a few moments, Issei was very surprised. I didn't expect to see him here, Vali said, shocking Sona. That's why you smelled a dragon. He must have been subconsciously marking his territory. Well, my territory, Issei said, looking at Saji. Who's him? Sona said. Well Sona, he was definitely worth 4 pieces. I think when he masters this gear he will have the most potential in your peerage, reaching Satan class power, ever exceeding you, Sona, Issei said, shocking everyone in the room except for Vali. What do you mean? Sona said, shocked. Well, your pawn here is in the possession of a sacred gear known as Absorption Line. It has the ability to shoot out a tongue that can hold most things in the supernatural world and reduce their strength. However, it's not as powerful as Divine Dividing in its reduction of power, Issei said, shocking Sona even more. On top of that, your pawn also possesses a fraction of the Dragon King Vritra's soul in his sacred gear, Vali said, continuing to shock the group. Your pawn is lucky, Ms. Citri. If the alpha male in this territory wasn't as relaxed and occupied as he is, your pawn would be dead, Vali said, causing Saji to sweat. Before Sona could speak, Issei quickly interrupted. Hey Saji, has the prison dragon spoke to you yet? Issei said, confusing him. What do you mean spoke? He replied. Okay, Sona, what I'm about to show you must stay in this room, okay? Issei said, confusing even Sona. Hey Diedrich, Issei said. When Issei said Diedrich, Sona was both confused and scared. There was only one creature that went by that name, and he possessed strength that rivaled the 3 factions combined, including God, in terms of power. What is it, partner? Diedrich said as the boosted gear appeared on Issei's arm. That's impossible. Issei, how can you have a sacred gear and the boosted gear? No less, you're a pure blood devil. Wait, are you the alpha in this territory? Sona said as she looked at Issei and Rias for answers. Well, I am a pure-blooded devil, but my mother was only a half-breed, so if that's how I have a sacred gear, and yes, I am the alpha in this territory, so Saji, I will teach you how to stop marking my territory, Issei said, flailing his aura, asserting his dominance as the alpha, causing Saji to step back as he fell to the floor. Wait, you didn't use that in your fight with Riser, did you? Sona said, looking at Issei. No, all I used was my demonic power alone to beat Riser. However, he did push it to my upper limit of my demonic strength at the moment, Issei said. Before Sona could speak, Albion made her presence known. Issei, what did you need my maid for? Albion said, further shocking Sona and her peerage. Wait, so your queen is also the White Dragon Empress as well? Sona said, ready to faint. Yes, but she's more. However, I can't tell you more. Sirzek told me not to tell anyone, Issei said looking at Sona. Diedrich, Albion, would you be able to see if Vritra is awake or all there? Issei said as the two dragons begin to looking into his sacred gear. Sorry partner, it appears not, Diedrich said. Yes, however if he had more gears he may wake up, Albion said supporting Diedrich's answer. As Issei pondered for a while he thought to where he may find them until he remembered something a certain someone said. Hey Vali, does your dad still have Vritra's other gears? Issei asked looking towards his queen. I think so, but it will take at least 2 weeks for him to get them ready, Vali said, shocking the others in the room. Vali, though you said that your family was Rias said, trying not to let Vali's past become past common knowledge. Well, the person I call dad isn't really my real father. After I met Issei he adopted me and helped us train my sacred gear with Issei, Vali said happily. Then who is he? Sona asked, wanting an answer. Sorry Sona, we can't tell you that, orders of Sirzek, Issei said, causing Sona to ponder about all the secrecy. Well, I will trust you, however if you hurt Saji in any way I will never forgive you, Sona said looking at Issei. There will be a cost, Issei said, shocking everyone. What is it? Sona said. I'll let you and Saji know after this meeting, Issei said with a massive grin on his face. Well, let's get on to this meeting, Rias said, moving on. As the group began to break off into their own little groups, the three queens began discussing a competition to see who the strongest queen amongst them was. Kaneko and Kiba began talking with the rest of Sona's pieces, discussing about things like school and home life. As the peerages were beginning to get along, the three kings sat down and began discussing certain events such as the Riser fight and Issei's Reinstatement as heir to a devil clan and how that affected the devil world. So Rias, are you still in charge of Kuo or is it under control of Issei, seeing that he is your future husband? Sona asked looking towards Rias, who was sitting now behind her desk. I'm still in charge of Kuo, however Issei is just an extra bit of muscle for both you and I if we need it, Rias said looking towards Issei, who nodded. That's all I wanted to know, however seeing that it's a full moon I'm going to see the familiar master this Thursday, Sona said, shocking Rias. Thursday, I'm already booked in for this Thursday as he has agreed to take both Issei and my peerages, Rias said, causing Sona to take off her glasses and clean them. So how do you suppose we sort this out? Sona said looking at Rias. How about sports? Rias said, smiling. The day after the meeting between the three devil households, a tennis match was held at the Kuo tennis courts. Somehow a friendly game between the king and queen of each peerage had turned out to be a massive school event. As Issei noticed Sona and Tsubaki walk onto the courts, half the school cheered. However, Issei heard one cheer in particular. Go Sona! The voice shouted. Saji's getting very excited, isn't he? Asia said, who was sitting next to him. Yes, but I don't think it's the tennis match he's excited for, Issei said as a large grin appeared on his face. When Sona heard Saji's cheer she couldn't help but blush. Not only was Saji the loudest, but he used her first name much to her enjoyment. This blush, however, didn't go unnoticed by a certain someone in the crowd. When Rias and Akeno came out the whole school went crazy. Cheers for the girls went from good luck to have my children, which angered Issei a bit as that was his future wife and her best friend who Issei held close to his heart that they were talking about. By the end of the tennis match both the rackets, courts and the fence that had trouble standing were destroyed. When the girls began they promised not to use magic, however the two childhood rivals could resist. In the end it turned out to be a draw, so the two decided to play a game of dodgeball the next day. As Issei and the group of girls arrived home, Akeno, Vali and Asia continued into the kitchen and began to prepare dinner, while Issei and Rias snuck upstairs and had a bath together. Getting undressed, the Rias ordered Issei to sit on the stool while she kneeled behind him. Rias, are you okay? Issei said as Rias began to soap up her breasts and wash Issei's back, causing Issei to shudder. Yeah, I'm fine, but I want to know, were you flirting with Sona today? Rias said as she looked down, continuing to wash his back. No, Rias, Sona is attractive but not on the level that you were, and plus I would never flirt with anyone else without your consent, my love, Issei said as he turned around, shocking Rias, who was still using her breasts to clean him, causing him to laugh. Then what are you going to do with that favor Sona owes you? Rias said, trying to not look him in the eyes. I'm going to use it, but not as you think, Issei said as he grabbed her chin, kissing her. What are you going to use it for then? Rias asked. As Issei told Rias what he is going to use the favor for, Rias could help but smile. You are truly a devil, my love, Rias said looking towards Issei, who smiled back at her. Hey Rias, do you remember when we used to do this as kids? Issei said, shocking her. You remember, I threw you would have forgotten, Rias said. Why would I forget, although things have changed greatly since then? Issei said as he grabbed her right breast, causing her to moan and Issei to grin. Yes, they sure have, but it's still as lovely as ever, Rias as she grabbed his dick. After an hour in the bathroom and 45 minutes of love-making, Issei and Rias exited the bathroom and went downstairs for dinner. When they arrived, the three girls were already sitting and eating. Sorry we were gone for so long, Rias said, sitting next to Akeno. It's fine, but you're both on cleanup duty, Akeno said as she winked at the two kings, causing Issei to smile and Rias to groan. After dinner, the three girls that prepared dinner went and had a bath, leaving Rias and Issei to clean up. When Rias and Issei finished cleaning up, they went to bed ready for the next day.
The next day, when the final school bell rang at the end of the school day, the corridors and the campus filled with students trying to get home. Issei and his friends, however, were at the gym waiting for the start of the dodgeball match. As the student council walked into the gym, the game began with Issei as the referee and Vali watching the game on the bench. The rapid throwing off dodgeball soon filled the room. After 2 rounds with 1 round apiece, the game was all tied at 1 game each. Beginning the third game, due to the prize on the line, Rias and her peerage quickly eliminated all of Sona's pieces except for Sona, Saji and Momo. Running towards the ball, Momo and Kaneko began fighting over the same ball, only for it to fall out of their hands, causing both of them being eliminated. Momo, Kaneko out, Issei said as he raised his flag. As the 2 girls walked off and sat on the bench with Vali, Issei turned his attention back to the game. He was surprised when he saw Rias preparing to throw a ball straight at Sona, who wasn't looking at her. Powering it with magic, Rias threw the ball, but all Sona could do was stand there and wait for the ball to hit her. Suddenly Saji jumped in front of Sona, protecting her from the ball, but getting hit in the nuts as a result. Falling to the ground in pain, before he even hit the ground, Issei blew the whistle. That's game. Winner Rias, Issei said as Rias cheered and hugged Akeno. Looking over to Saji, he was pleased to see that he was in Sona's arms. Sorry Sona, I lost the game for you, Saji said as he looked up at his master. It's okay, I'm just glad you're okay, she replied, blushing as she moved her hair over her ear. After the game, Sona, Saji, Rias and Issei returned to the orc. So Rias, why did you want just Saji and I here? Sona said as she looked at her friend. Well, we want to talk to you too, Issei said as he pulled Saji into the next room. Rias POV as Rias and Sona sat on the lounge and drank the tea that Rias prepared, the two began to speak. So Rias, why am I here? Sona said as looked at the Crimson Devil. Tell me Sona, why did you make Saji your servant? Rias said, shocking Sona. Because I sensed great potential in him, and seeing that he possessed part of the soul of a Dragon King, I think it paid off, she replied, not making eye contact with her. Is that all? Rias replied as Sona began to move her hands. Rias could only smile. You like him, don't you? She replied. What do you mean? Of course I like him, he's my servant, she said in her defense. Not like that Sona, Rias replied with a serious look on her face. Sitting still for a moment, all was quiet until Sona spoke up. Yes I do like him. That's the real reason why I made him a devil, so I could live with him forever, and considering I'm not in engagement anymore, I thought it would all work out, but I can't be with him as 2 others in my peerage like him too. That's why I treat him like a younger brother. It's the only way I can get close to him, she replied, beginning to cry. Well Sona, you're their master, so if it makes you feel better, create a harem for him and manage it for him, Rias said, looking at her best rival. You don't get it Rias, I want him for myself. I don't want to share him, Sona said, standing up. Then don't, another voice said, scaring Sona. Saji, how much of that did you hear? Sona said, looking at Saji nervously. All of it, Saji said, causing Sona to blush and look away. Walking closer to her, Saji soon wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her into his embrace. I like you too Sona, Saji said, shocking her. You do, but, she said, surprising being cut off. Shocking everybody in the room, Saji gave Sona a kiss on the lips, causing her to go red. Does that prove how much I care for you? Saji said as Sona hugged him as she laid her head on her chest. That was my first kiss, she said quietly to herself. As Issei and Rias sat there on the lounge watching the whole thing happy, Sona soon spoke up. So what did you want to talk about? Sona said as the other 2 giggled. Sona, for the smartest girl in the school, you're pretty dumb when it comes to love, Rias said, holding Issei's hand. What do you mean? Saji said, looking at the 2. Well, over the 2 days of commotion between our groups, I noticed that you 2 couldn't keep your eyes off each other. Am I wrong? Issei said, causing the 2 to blush. Plus the debt you owe me is gone Sona, Issei said, shocking her.
What do you mean I don't owe you? I've done nothing to pay you back, Sona said. But you have given me another strong rival, a dragon no less, and you made Rias happy, by you being happy, Issei said as the two began to walk out the door. Oh, and Saji, if you have any trouble with the mate mark, just ring me, okay? Issei said, causing Saji to make a lewd face and Sona to pinch him as they left the room. After Sona and Saji left, Issei could help but smile and look at Rias, who was blushing. What up, Rias? Issei asked. Nothing, you just go out of your way to make people happy, don't you? That's the part of you I love the most, she said as she kissed him. As Issei and Rias began kissing, they were interrupted by the arrival of the rest of the orc. Walking into the room, the group could only look at Rias and Issei. In front of them, the orc noticed that Rias was laying on her back on the couch, with Issei grabbing her left breast while laying on top of her as they kissed. What is big brother Issei doing to Rias-sama? Asia asked curiously, begin oblivious to love. Being a pervert, Kaneko said in a monotone voice. Is it time already? Issei asked, frustrated that they were interrupted. Yes, it is, Vali and Akeno said as they separated the two. As the group entered a teleportation circle, the orc clubroom soon turned into a dark forest. Beginning to walk, the group soon reached a clearing in the trees. Entering the clearing, they were greeted by a middle-aged man with a backwards-facing hat. Greetings, devils. My name is Zatoji and I'm the familiar master's apprentice. What can I do for you? He said as he pointed towards himself. Hello Zatoji, it's good to see you again, Rias said happily. Ah, Lady Gremory, I see you have 3 new servants, Zatoji said as he pointed to Issei, Vali and Asia while stroking his chin. Yes, I have got 1 new servant. I would like you to meet Asia, Rias said, pointing to the blonde bishop. It's nice to meet you, Asia said, nervously bowing. So who are the other 2? Zatoji said, pointing to Vali and Issei. This here is Issei Boer, heir to the Boer clan and my future husband and his queen, Rias said, happy as she wrapped her arm around Issei. My apologies, sir, the familiar master said. No, it's fine, Issei replied. So what type of familiar are you looking for? Zatoji said, looking at the 3. I already have something in mind, but it's not here, so don't worry, Vali said, shocking everyone but Issei. You know, if you go for him, you're going to piss off a certain god, Issei said, looking at Vali. I know, she replied, grinning. A god, Akeno said as they looked at Vali. Suddenly Issei was smashed into a nearby tree by a massive blue tail. Smash! Issei's body continued through 3 trees until he made a sudden stop when it crashed into a massive rock, cracking it on impact. Issei! They all screamed. When the devils turned around, they were completely terrified at what they were looking at. Even Vali was taken back a bit at the power this creature was leaking out of its body. In front of them stood a massive pale blue western dragon standing 20 meters height. Diedrich, you dare show up here with your host after you promised to create a dragon faction with me in Albion? The dragon yelled, looking at Issei. As Issei began to stand up, the dragon fired an attack of blue flames hurtling towards Issei. Leaping out of the way, Issei began to power up, firing an attack of darkness at the dragon. Diedrich, who is this? Issei asked the dragon in his left hand as he blocked an attack that the dragon shot at him. This is Tiamat, one of the 5 dragon kings and the strongest at that, Diedrich said, responding to the question. And why is she attacking us? Issei said as he dodged another attack and successfully punching the dragon in the head before kicking her in the neck, sending her back through a couple of trees. As the dragon and Issei were fighting, Rias and the others began to take cover in a trench that was carved out thanks to the battle. Albion, who is this? Vali asked as the others looked towards the dragon for guidance. That is Tiamat, the Chaos Karma dragon. She is one of the dragon kings and the strongest amongst the 5. Albion said, causing Rias to panic. Dragon King, we have to help him, she said as she began to climb out of the trench, only to be pulled back by Vali. Vali, what are you doing? She yelled at Issei's queen. This is a battle between dragons, Rias, do not interfere, Albion told the young devil. Looking back towards the fight, they had noticed that all the trees in a 1-kilometer radius had been destroyed, and in the middle of it, Issei and Tiamat stood with a black and blue aura surrounding them respectfully. You're pretty strong welder of Diedrich, but I've noticed that you're not using your sacred gear, Tiamat said, looking towards Issei. Yeah, I've been using my devil power this whole time, don't get me wrong, I would love to use Diedrich. However, Diedrich has always told me that dragons use their own strength before someone else's, Issei replied, causing Tiamat to smile. You're not scared of me, are you, young man? Tiamat said, looking at Issei. Not really, don't get me wrong, you are scary, but I've trained with Tannen ever since I was about 6 years old, so dragons have always been part of my life. Issei replied, shocking Tiamat. You know Tannen, so you must be a devil, but how do you possess Diedrich then? She replied, confused. After Issei discussed his lineage, the battle commenced blow after blow. Issei could kept up with Tiamat, impressing the Dragon King. This continued until Tiamat was able to successfully hit Issei in the chest with her tail, sending him flying. Smashing into a tree, Issei soon slumped underneath it. Getting up, Issei noticed that Tiamat was charging at him, using what Tannen taught him in training. Issei met Tiamat's fist with his own. When the two collided, a massive seismic wave was sent out, knocking over everybody in the process. The two stayed there locked in a power struggle until a massive crack was heard. Looking towards the fight, Rias was horrified. Issei's forearm had broken at the elbow, causing a compound fracture. His shoulder was also dislocated, but the thing that shocked Rias the most was he was smiling. Why are you smiling, boy? Tiamat demanded. Look, was all Issei said before he collapsed. As Tiamat looked down, she noticed a massive crack running up her scaly forearm. He cracked my scales. The only one who's done that before was Diedrich. This kid may be the strongest Red Dragon Emperor ever, Tiamat thought to herself as she caught the falling Issei. As Rias ran over to Issei, she and her entire peerage began to power up, all except Vali, who only laughed. She won't hurt you, Vali said, walking up to Tiamat. Why won't she hurt us? She attacked Issei, Rias said as she looked at Vali. In dragon law it states once a fight is over, the winner decides whether to kill the opponent or not, and Issei is lucky in the not category. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dragon King Tiamat, Vali said as she bowed politely. Girl, how do you know our law? Tiamat said as she looked at Vali. Because I'm this generation's White Dragon Empress, Vali said as she deployed her wings, shocking Tiamat. Albion, Tiamat said in disbelief. Hello Tia, it's been a while, Albion said, shocking everyone including Vali. Tia, Vali said as she looked at Tiamat, who started to glow a pale blue. When the light died down, the great blue dragon was replaced with a young woman who appeared to be in her 20s. Her pale blue hair reached her lower back, and she was 5 feet 11 in height and was slightly shorter than Issei. Yeah, the truth is, Diedrich, Albion and I go way back. The reason I attacked Issei was because Diedrich promised me that S3 would restart the dragon faction after it was destroyed in ancient times. However, both Diedrich and Albion were placed in sacred gears before that. As a result, I felt abandoned, and when I meet someone who possessed Diedrich, they wanted nothing to do with me. That's why I started to hate Diedrich's possessors, Tiamat said, looking down. You forgot to mention that you and I were Diedrich's mates, however we died before you reached maturity, Albion said, shocking everyone and causing Tiamat to blush. Yeah, because of that I've never found anyone worthy of being my mate until now, Tiamat said as she kissed Issei on the cheek, angering Rias. As Issei began to wake up, Rias was pleased to see he was alive, and thanks to Asia's healing he was back to his normal fitness. Looking around, he noticed that all his friends were there, but there was something weird. Guys, where's Tiamat and who's the pretty girl? Issei said, confused, casting Tiamat to blush. I'm right here, Tiamat said as she pointed towards herself. What, I thought you were a massive dragon, Issei said as he remembered what he said. Partner, I already told you dragons can have human forms, remember Tannen's, Diedrich said, appearing on his left hand. Issei, I believe that you have the strength to allow me to become your familiar if you want me as yours, Tiamat said, shocking everyone. No, I don't want you as my familiar, Issei said, shocking everyone. Am I not good enough? Tiamat said, flaring her aura. No, you're too good to be my familiar, that's why I want you as my rook, Issei said, shocking everybody including Tiamat as he presented the rook piece. As Tiamat looked at Issei for a moment, she soon smiled. I accept. Standing up, Issei placed the rook piece on Tiamat's chest. In the name of Issei Buer, I call to you, Tiamat. Surrender your soul to me and become part of my family as my rook and greatest defense, Issei said as the piece sunk into her chest. With the ceremony over, the group began to leave until one person spoke up. Rias-sama, how do I make this my familiar? Asia said, shocking everyone. When everyone turned around, they were surprised by the fact that in Asia's hands was a small blue dragon. A sprite dragon, Tiamat said, looking at the creature. What's a sprite dragon? Asia asked as she looked at Tiamat. A sprite dragon is a high-class dragon. They are one of only a few species of normal dragon that can reach this class. Sprite dragons are lightning users and shot lightning as their major attack rather than fire or ice. As a dragon, he is very territorial around other males and will protect people that he considers family, Tiamat said as the sprite dragon zapped Issei, causing everyone to laugh. Where did you find it? Issei said as he got off the ground, still smoldering from the attack the small dragon sent his way. Oh, he saved me from some of the debris that was created in your battle, so I named him Rias, Asia said as he shocked Issei again. As everybody smiled at the former nun as Asia was taught and began to contract the young dragon to her service. In the name of Ossia Argento, I call to you, young familiar, become my friend and join my family, Asia said as a magic circle around the young dragon. When the circle was complete, Rias flew onto Asia's shoulder. Everyone began to look at Issei. So Tiamat, are you going to live with us or still here in your cave in the forest? Issei said as he looked at the Dragon King. If it's okay with you, I'll be moving in with you. Tannen may have trained you, but his training will look like child's play once you all start training with me, and please call me Tia. Tiamat said, shocking everybody and causing Issei to sweat. Wait, are you going to train us as well? Rias said, looking at the Dragon King. Yes, Lady Gremory. You are the younger sister of the devil Lucifer and my new master's future wife. You need to know how to protect yourself and any future hatchlings if you're alone. Tiamat said, shocking Rias and causing her to blush at the mention of children. Wait, how did you know that Issei and I were getting married? Rias said, shocked. I can smell the mate mark on your neck. That's how I knew Diedrich was here. Diedrich must have told you about how it gives you respect amongst dragons. Tiamat replied as she removed her hair, showing a mate mark similar to Rias but very ancient looking. Oh, was all Rias said as she rubbed her neck in embarrassment. Well, we better get home or we won't get enough sleep for school tomorrow, Issei said, creating a magic circle. As everyone was ready to go home, they entered a magic circle and vanished. That's it for this video. And if you guys liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe and share this video with your friends. Take care, guys.